Now, last year, the Paris Peace Forum chose the High Seas Alliance, an international coalition of NGOs, as one of its 10 scale-up projects in the hope that they would be able to usher more convening power and bring more opinions to the table to help the political process in negotiating this third implementing agreement. What is it all about? It is about governance of the high seas. The high seas are 43% of the surface of the planet. They are fully 2/3 of the ocean. And if we listened to the scientists would probably tell us, declare the entirety of the high seas a marine protected area, and you will see the bonus of doing that in economic terms as nations with EEZs benefit from the replenishment of life in the ocean. If we listen to the economists would probably say that is the thing to do, follow the science. But also because the numbers speak to that reality. Less than 10% of global fish catch is catched in the high seas. It is done so by less than a dozen countries that only are able to do so because of the subsidies that their fleets receive. Less than 1% of total employment in the fishery industry is engaged in fishing in the high seas. So it doesn't make any economic sense either. Now, politically, this is where we have the challenge, and that is where we're going to be listening from our discussion leaders to see where the process is and how we can help it along.
So moving into 2021 and the preparations for the fourth session, one aspect that I think will be helpful for all delegations is to consider how to stitch the various disparate parts together. And all this intersessional work that's going on actually bodes well for our fourth session.
La France est en première ligne aux côtés de l'Union européenne et des autres pays les plus ambitieux dans la négociation du traité de protection de la biodiversité en haute mer, dit BBNJ. La science montre que les océans sont interconnectés. L'écosystème océanique est également reconnu comme tel dans le préambule de l'accord de Paris. Il y a aujourd'hui un déficit d'encadrement des activités en haute mer impactant la biodiversité. La haute mer est donc une zone où la gouvernance est insuffisante. Nous sommes nombreux à le dire et nous sommes nombreux à vouloir trouver des solutions pour mieux protéger ce bien commun que nous avons, et j'insiste sur ce bien commun qu'est l'océan.
A healthy ocean means a healthy future. And the ocean produces at least 50% of our oxygen. And the seas store massive amounts of heat and carbon. And some estimates put the ocean's annual contribution to global GDP at $70 trillion. Tens of millions of jobs depend on fisheries and tourism. 90% of global trade volume relies on ocean shipping. The list goes on. And without a healthy ocean and without an agreement on how to protect large areas of it, we are waging a huge gamble on the future of our children and grandchildren. And that's not a risk I want to take. Let me add that this treaty is also important for another reason. At a time when we are reminded of the dangers of unilateralism on a daily basis, there is no better example than the climate and ocean crises to highlight the need for international cooperation and multilateralism. We will only be able to tackle these challenges if we set aside our differences, reject narrow national interests, and if we all stand together as one.
The EU is therefore determined to lead by example and to do its utmost to help agree and adopt an ambitious new post-2020 global biodiversity framework at the 15th Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Most importantly, we must ensure that this framework also includes ambitious marine targets, including a 30% goal for marine protected areas. And to achieve this, new ambitious targets, international governments with respect to the high seas will be an essential element. These waters that lay beyond the national jurisdiction of states are a shared good that must be protected by all of us. This is where the new High Seas Treaty has a key role to play if we want to take collective responsibility and action to conserve and sustainably use the high seas, including the biodiversity. We must do it now. And I believe that a new High Seas Treaty is the indispensable step to put an end to the downward spiral where we are and be able to preserve a marine life that is so essential to us and, of course, to next generations.
I think that what we've been trying to do in the process is to involve all the different players in the process, not simply states, but for observers, we have other international organizations. And as Sir Richard points out, the importance of involving business in this treaty, and there have been business organizations that have also participated in the process, and of course civil society organizations like the High Seas Alliance. They are also important to the process. To me, in order to get there, the key is balance. So I come back to the question of what a balanced package will look like. And I suggest three perspectives that we can look at, which I encourage delegations to think about. First is a balance between the various interests and concerns of the different delegations, the different interests, the business interests, the environmental interests, there are all these various interests. We need to see what is that balance. Second, a balance between conservation and sustainable use. And this is something that we have been discussing in the IGC itself. And third, a balance between certainty, meaning what the treaty needs to say in order to provide a sufficient degree of clarity as to what we are seeking to build, and flexibility, meaning to say where do we need to give room for the treaty to develop over time so that it is future-proof. And by having some thoughts and having a vision of where this balance is, I believe we can reach a successful conclusion.
Donc la France, elle est très impliquée sur ces sujets au sein de l'UE, bien sûr, mais elle le veut aussi pour que 2021 soit un succès sur ce dossier. Elle veut le faire aussi dans l'ensemble de ses relations internationales. Au plus haut niveau, lors des discussions bilatérales que nous avons, nous évoquons cette question des océans avec nos partenaires chinois, avec le Japon, avec l'Inde, s'il fallait n'en citer que 3. Et l'année prochaine, il faut effectivement tous ensemble qu'on arrive à conclure ce traité BBNJ qui doit être ambitieux et robuste. J'entends bien la notion d'équilibre, mais qui doit être robuste et ambitieux, et ça c'est important.
We know that negotiating a treaty is not an easy thing to do, particularly with just so many countries involved. But we do have a once-in-a-generation chance to get things right, to make an agreement that serves the interests of all future generations. Yes, we're dealing with complex issues, but we must not let this generation's politics get in the way of a strong treaty that goes beyond maintaining the status quo. We really need a fundamental change in the way our ocean is managed and the way it is protected. And over the last 2 years, we've all been inspired by young people taking to the streets and demanding change, demanding action. And this is our chance to listen and act for the good of our planet and for the good of these future generations. We must stop delaying action. And finally, we just must reach an agreement in 2021. And for those who are in the front line doing it, best of luck with you.
I think, first of all, what is needed to the finish line is political courage. The courage to listen, science, and to do what's that's sort of the biggest step what's needed. The courage to make decisions, not just for the next 5 years or next elections, but for the future generations. So we need to create the tools now to make sure that we can properly assess the likely impact of the activities, both now and in the future. Secondly, we need a transformative agreement that will contribute to a holistic management of the high seas. The agreement should help bring together the silos that currently characterize ocean governance. A sustainable blue economy will only be able to flourish within the limits of our planet, and the ocean must be managed as a whole. So the establishment of the necessary mechanism for international cooperation and coordination is a requirement in this respect. Thirdly, improved high seas governance can only be achieved through an inclusive approach, and we need developing countries as much as developed ones to succeed. So therefore, sufficient means must be made available to ensure developing states' participation in the activities under the new treaty and to strengthen their capacities to conserve and sustainably use marine resources.